Hello one, hello all, one. I hope y'all doing good. You know what I'm saying? Um, okay, I'm just gonna start off the video right off the bat with this. So this is an early piece of artwork that I did. Frogbear.zil. I created a Telegram group where I maintain a bunch of news. Uh, I decided to do that mainly because I post way too much. I don't feel like anybody should be bombarded with that much information. Just because I can digest it all doesn't mean other people can. Um, so what was I doing at the time? I can't remember how long ago this was. This was probably already like over a year ago, where I had first joined a group of people, um, and we decided to make a group called Synchronicity Syndicate. At first, it started off with four of us, then it dwindled to two of us, and as of now, I don't really know where all that really stands. But when I was creating this piece of artwork, I was creating it for the sole purpose of it being the background to us speaking. Um, the more I researched and the more I learned, the more I drifted away from that idea. Mainly because, it's the whole reason why I'm not putting my face at the beginning of all this. Because, okay, how do I begin to explain this? So, um, what was I doing besides bullying people on the internet? That's how I heal. No, I'm joking. I don't bully. Well, I do, but I don't even know how to explain this anymore. Essentially, I'm still on hiatus, but just want to voice my opinions. Um, so I was on the internet, harassing people on 4chan as usual. That's my stomping ground, 4chan. Um, while on there, I hang out on paranormal, business, and politics. I do not recommend anybody ever going on on the website. If you don't know about the war or the culture scuffle that's currently ongoing around the world, I do not suggest going on 4chan. It is a cesspool, and you would only find yourself losing yourself in all these loose form factors of rhetoric, and then you could end up believing nonsense, and it leads to a whole bunch of problems. But back to the topic at hand. Um, while doing all this, I was listening to somebody's. It's like an episodic series, I guess. No, I've been learning more about. So I took a break from looking into the occult because I was looking into more of the medical stuff. But I decided to go back to it to kind of wind my brain down a little bit. And in the process of doing this, I found this picture, and it reminded me of Synchronicity Syndicate and how everything I've done up to this point has been very interesting. It's been aligned to a very peculiar fashion. And I thought explaining this in this factor would get some of my thoughts down. So, something I've noticed is the beliefs of others. Now, I'm not going to suggest these are my beliefs, but these are reoccurring themes and reoccurring ideas that I've seen repeat constantly and very frequently, to the point where I've started taking notations of it every single time. You can see a variety of different artists use the iconography of two pillars, right? Like the two pillars I have here. One of them is golden to represent sun, red energy, or just the color red in general, but orange hue, whatever. And then the other tower, which is blue, which representing the moon, the color blue. Um, it would be normal for somebody who lives amongst normal people, who does normal things, and who lives a normal life. They would assume that all this shit means nothing. They would assume that, oh, you're just making reference to the natural world. But a lot of religion actually comes from observations of natural life. So with how religion started was, right, like the Bible is a collection of stories, is because they were using a form factor to try to describe even bigger ideas. Um, People like to quabble about the validity of any of the three pillar religions, but the way I see it is why I named it the occult. I normally would never name a stream like this, but occult just means hidden. So like sometimes I'll question certain things about Judaism. They'll call me anti-Semitic. I'll question something about Muslims. They'll call me whatever names about because I question Islam. And then you could do the same thing with Christianity, et cetera, et cetera. And it's the point that people forget is it's not that you should believe it. It's just that you should notice that people really believe in a lot of these things so concretely that they will not deviate from their original ideas of what they conceive of these ideas, these notions, the ideology, the religion, etc. And because it establishes and it cements such a very hard-headed way of looking at this information, people will not go beyond that, and they'll always revert back to their original position, even though somebody like me could come along and be like, hey, like me personally, I have a problem with the current image and iteration of the image of Christ. Because if you look into the history of it, you would find out that the image of Christ was popularized by Pope Alexander the Sixth. I can't remember. I think it was the Sixth. Pope Alexander the Sixth. He had a bastard child named with the Borgia family, and his name was Cesare Borgia. This individual is very peculiar in history because, right, like the most famous book, The Prince by Nicholas Machiavelli, is a depiction of Cesare Borgia's life. And if you look into it and do meaningful research into it, you'd find out that like it is assumed that because the first iteration of what you would call the printing press was established, it allowed for Pope Alexander to popularize the image of his son as the image of Christ. So something that I've seen as a reoccurring theme with what I've gathered researching the occult is, if it's a popular idea, it's popular for a reason. And it's usually for obfuscation reasons. It's usually to muddy the water enough that if anyone in the future tries to dispute any of the claims, dispute any of the facts, it would become very difficult because it's a quote unquote tradition. Now you can't break or deviate from this idea because it is a pre-established idea, so you should respect your forefathers. And we build and cement these ideas on faulty foundations. It's kind of why I found that story of Benjamin Franklin not being the inventor of electricity so fascinating, because that's something if you ask any normal American and you ask them who invented electricity, if you paid attention in class, it's Benjamin Franklin. At least that's the answer that I'm looking for, because that's something that was popular in school, only to find out that that was one of his experiments that was never actually recreated. So I think it's not like Jesus didn't exist, or I'm trying to dispute the Bible, or I'm doing any of that. But what I'm looking at is, then why do we have such heavy attempts from institutions, the Vatican, various other form factors, try to really establish this idea of what Christ should look like, instead of like learning from the teachings? We get caught up in the squabble of who was he, what is his background, what is his lineage, what is his bloodline. And I feel like these are tactics that I've seen repeat, not just with religion in question, but right with the invention of electricity, with the invention of XYZ. And then we get into these notions where we like to believe all these loose ideas, and it's just like, the answer is obvious. But for whatever reason, you just don't want to point the finger at the people who are causing and benefiting from this strife that just reoccurs in the themes. But I've noticed there's a reoccurring pattern with the people that like to create this strife. And that is their use of art. That is their use of symbols, and that is their use of their understanding of the world. So it goes to something I had said a bit before, which was what we know of religion to some degree is what we've seen in observable reality. So I was listening to what was it called? Soul Talk? I can't remember, but I don't even know if I should link that podcast in here. I don't know. I like the sound of this person's voice, so I just listen to it. But she said something very interesting about how when you are born, when the astrology chart, the way that the stars are aligned and where the celestial bodies are at whatever time, um, her explanation of it was very um forthcoming. Very, I don't know. I found a lot of sense in it because it's like if we assume that these celestial bodies affect who you come out as a person, why is that? But then you get into the question of magnetism, you get into the question of the ethereal, but anytime you go that far, you already get met with the wall of, oh no, I trust the science. Oh no, I trust observable material fact. And it's like, I feel you, but if you look at any ancient religion, I don't know. I always get reminded of the idea of um can't remember which rule this is, but I think it's Gnosticism for sure, where it comes down to all things are and are not all at the same time. And the reason why that statement works is because just like water can be a liquid, it could also be a solid, but it can also not be a solid at the same time. You tend to find out that some things just are and are not all at the same time. Weird, crazy, confusing, but it's just the way, right? It's something that's been observable in reality. Um and it kind of, it can kind of tie into like how some people will gaslight themselves out of reality just because it's far more suitable for them to be in that paradigm. A weird example, either way. So going back to this art, and me going back into researching the occult and looking into people that repeat certain iconography, certain artwork, I've noticed that it's always the same illusion or the same allegory, the same, what do I want to call this? Just the way that like they represent the symbols to mean what they mean. I need to get through this so I can actually take this picture down. So the sun and the moon pillar, at least from what I've researched, represent Joachim and Boaz, which is a story of two lovers separated. I'm not too sure. I didn't read too far into it. And this was like over a year ago, so I can't even remember too well why I used the symbolism in this. For sure, I used these green frog legs only because I wanted it to represent Pepe. I'm a 4chaner, chaos god, blah 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 blah. Not to like really mean it like that, but I thought it'd be fun, like edgy, cool, whatever. So I used these green frog legs, and the color scheme was something that I just don't understand why I did it the way I did it. Where okay, so this came down. I only did this because of what me researching what I do, and just I'm a very good listener where I just listen to like everything. I remember there's a theory that says that the moon is just a reflection of the sun. So when I made the moon, when I drew the sun, like there was this very peculiar process of how I created the moon tower, like the moon pillar, in how I made it a reflection of the other pillar. And I had like done this very specific process of like how I colored it and how I layered it. I don't remember why I did it. I just remember doing it that way. And right, Joachim and Boaz are also, they represent like aspects of order and establishment, foundations. I can't remember too well. Like I should really, brush myself on I think it was Manning P. Hall, the book that I was using as a reference. Putting these two pillars, I put them on top of a checkerboard because I was making a reference to what every other person I've seen do, which is make a reference to the black and white nature of our reality. And it's not that our nature is black and white, it's more that it's represented as such in our minds. Like the way we're taught at schools, the way that we're dictated to, and the way that we're explained life sometimes, I feel like it's stuck in a very binary thought process where it's either black or it's either white. And because we create these aspects of only allowing you to view it in this particular fashion, you get stuck playing in the gray. And I think that's what, or at least that's what I assume that's what the people in power wish for it to be a constant of, which is gray lines, which is the gray zone. Because now it's like, I don't know, like you're abstracting the reality enough so that people aren't entirely sure if they're making black or white decisions because they're just picking different shades of gray. And I don't know. This gets more into me listening to that one podcast where this person was explaining karma. And now this is something that I've actually noticed too. The use of the scale in music videos is a reoccurring thing that I've noticed. I remember watching a Jay-Z video that I can't remember the name of, where I saw him hold the scale and I was just kind of like, that's very peculiar. And I don't even know if it was that, like the video was to that song that I was listening to because it looked like a mashup. Then there was one that I can think of most recently is Doja Cat. Doja Cat has a song that gets even weirder too, especially with The Weeknd, who's featured on that song. He depicts himself as Aquarius as we're entering. Like, it's super trippy to see that. Is it the artists themselves that understand these themes, or is it the director? Is it the artistry behind a lot of like music videos or poster promotion? Like, who is the person that gets the final say so when creating this stuff, right? Because again, this is why I'm using this picture as my background. Because when I drew this calendar, I drew it fully understanding what I was using, right? Representing the sun, the moon, representing Joaquin, Boaz, depicting them as players in this checkerboard reality. And it's kind of sad because I actually didn't finish this drawing, but there were supposed to be curtains on the side to represent the show it is, and then the background, the reason why it's blue and a very violet kind of pinkish red is because these are representing, I can't remember what two energies this were. This was when I was looking into the Shem HaCharash, which is the 70, it's the name of God, right? Like, you have to get this Bible verse from Genesis. It's the name of God, and you can separate the Bible. When you arrange this Bible verse in original Hebrew in a certain fashion, it will give you this long string that you can separate into 72 names. These are supposed to represent the 72 aspects of God amongst his choir of angels. I'm not too sure. I just have a oracle deck that I found, again, synchronistically, and me research, like, this was all at a time where I was looking for I wanted answers, and the answers that I kept asking for just kept leading me to places where it became very difficult for me to like deviate from my original programming, because I'm like, wait, but I was taught that this, and this, when in reality it's like, nah, it's not really like this, and this. In reality, we created these psychological operations in order to throw you off the trail and associate these words and these teachings with various other things, so you would get lost in the obfuscation. And very interesting, because this, back to this Soul Talk chick, she was saying stuff, and I'm like, there's only one other place that I've heard ramblings that are similar to this, and that was when I was researching Giordano Bruno. And if you look into Giordano Bruno, like, his story, the way he ended was particularly brutal because they burned him alive, but because they were so afraid of him speaking that they sewed his mouth together. And I was like, there's my Californian. Like, oh my God. I was like, why would they do that? No, don't do that. I'm so it comes into question of what were you in such what were you in so much fear of that you had to sew his mouth together? Because before he got put at the stake, he actually went to like a lecture hall, debated all these other priests, and like he made an escape. I can't remember under what crusade. I don't even think it's called the crusade. Like, it's kind of messed up when you look into some of the history of the Catholic Church. But again, it's not that I'm bashing Christianity, the religion. I'm just bashing the decisions of men. It's like there were people who sought to benefit from their position and power in some of these ecclesiastical positions, because back in the day, during those times, the place that you can find the most power was within these religious institutions, because it was unquestioned. Like, your authority in a lot of these situations was unquestioned, and the citizenry played along with it. But again, this is why I believe that a lot of our modern day politics, it was kind of lifted and studied from this particular time period of Alexander Borgia, Cesare. It wasn't Alexander. I think it was the Pope's name was a very different last name, but his name was Alexander Benedict VI. Cesare Borgia, his son, who aspired to have political roles, is who you should really look at, because looking at his life tells you all you need to know how one institution can work along with these private individuals in order for them to enact their will amongst the political dynasties. In the Prince, I think it was Florencia, the Florence family, that was kicked out by, can't remember what other family, but in the book it describes how this external family who wasn't from that city came in, subverted everybody's expectations in the town, and got the citizenry to kick out their previous leaders. Only for what? For the new people to come into power and completely reign actual complete terror. So, very interesting stuff to see happen. But I look at it as, where does it come down to? Is it just that modern day artists are looking towards old art and learning from it? Or do we still see some aspect of, I said, covens, circles, just for like, how I say, special interest groups when it comes down to the financial sector or the politics sector or dynasties? I assume that there are secret circles. This is why we use the word occult, because occult just means hidden, where we have these cults that are operating amongst themselves with their own agendas without us fully knowing. And the reason why I think the public, and largely at hand, everyone else doesn't know about this, is because of the nature of how they maintain themselves, which is through secrecy, and which is not telling people the truth. It's why I find the Catholic, or institutions, just institutions, not any one particular religion, because once you institutionalize, you tend to find out that it attracts a certain kind of person. It attracts a certain kind of individual who has a certain kind of agenda. And, these are just reoccurring themes that I've seen researching the occult, researching religions through a historical perspective, and then the time gaps. Let me tell you about the time. All right, we're not going to go there. Way out of hand. Because I still wanted to get rid of this picture. Black and white checkerboards. They were supposed to be white. I understand that you're not looking at black and white checkerboards. But that represents the nature of the Masonic lodges as well, because something that I found very peculiar was reading about some of the early Civil War not Civil War. It was when America gained their independence from England. Uh, at least there are books that detail and suggest that by and large it wasn't there were certain events that weren't instigated by actual redcoats. Instead, it was like Americans, quote unquote Americans, because at this time America wasn't really a thing. So it was citizens and other people from England and from these companies that had came over to colonize. They decided amongst each other, because they were also Freemasons, hey, we shouldn't do what the British Crown is telling us to do, and we can create these fake altercations between us and them that will rile up people, thus creating the conditions, in my opinion, for allowing them to revolutionize and for them to break off from British rule. But depending on what you know about Benjamin Franklin and him being a spy for the British Crown, I don't know. Depending on what you know about the Federal Reserve System, money, the inherent value of just things, it gets more complicated, right? Like, as the years went on, the more the abstraction just kept following through. But one of the things that allowed for the creation and the establishment of America, a lot of people don't know this, is a Catholic doctrine. It was a Catholic doctrine written by Thomas Aquinas. Now, people who know their religious shit, like people who consider themselves theocrists and whatever the fuck, they would look at me and be like, you're lying. There's no way in hell Thomas Aquinas had this doctrine written up that allowed for the establishment of America. No, I'm pretty sure he wrote it, and I'm pretty sure there's actually a couple Supreme Court judges that have entire opinions written on this. So, you want to argue with me? Argue with the Smithsonian or the National Archive Museum. Not me, my boy. The Discovery Doctrine, written by Thomas Aquinas, which essentially said, right, the document was fairly easy to read, which said, he who discovers unknown lands or unknown groups of people, they themselves are allowed the discretion of handling how they deal with the inhabitants. Now, originally, what that meant was, diplomatic treaties. You gotta find a meaningful method of communication, so you're not just killing people. Well, when England was handed the reins of control, after the Spanish didn't want them to do what they did, it gets complicated, and it depends on what you know about history and da 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 da. A lot of this shit's hard to find. Funny how I said that. Yeah, it just gets very complicated with what you know about history. But one thing is for sure, the religious class was backing a certain nation. They had favorites. And if that wasn't the case, then I wonder why the 100-Year War started. But essentially, what I think happened was the Catholic Church did not want to support France anymore, did not want to support the Spanish anymore. So they turned towards England. And this was at a time when England was very well known for hiring pirates. And that's a whole other portion of history that I don't even want to touch on. I don't know. Looking at the pirate thing, looking at the Skull and Bones, looking at the way Masonic lodges were forming, you had a variety of interest groups that all wanted to do their own thing, but a lot of it started with Masonic lodges. And Masonic lodges became a point of contention. So much so that during the late 1800s to the early 1900s, there was a pseudo-Catholic Masonic war going on in America. And if that's not the case, then why did a Masonic president take over Mexico and then try to kill all of the Catholic priests inside of Mexico? I'm not saying it was humane, but I'm saying that there were these events and these things in the occult, in the hidden, in the shadows, in the gray zones that were occurring. And all of these decisions ultimately led to certain ultimate factors. I don't know. I don't know what I'm trying to say with all that. Because I was going back to the art. And it just gets down to how many times do I have to see a reoccurring pattern, a reoccurring theme, in order for me not to assume that. Oh, wait, wrong background. I have to get my spiral back. Yeah, okay. And another thing, you can't. The reason why I actually had to switch to this background and not the other background was for. It depends on what you know about magic, right? Like that whole art piece in someone's eyes, and depending on how they think about it, because of the way that I drew it and because of the way I painted it, one would assume that I'm a practitioner. And I'm like, no, 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 no. I am, like, by no means am I doing any of that. But then again, like, I don't know. I just find with the way that I ended up here and with the way that things have happened in my life, I don't know anymore. I really don't know anymore. Like, with everything I've learned, it's like, why do we, like, all right, an American who grew up their early 20s and their late teen years, if they were in California around the time, let's say like 82 to 86, we had the Satanic Panic, right? Anton LaVey. Anton LaVey was very famous for saying Shem Ha Karash and doing all this weird spooky shit, right? But when you look into that phrase, when you look into the name and when you look into it really deeply, you find out that all he's saying is the exalted one, the exalted name. And that just, and if you look further into where that phrase comes from, that term, you get into Hebrew, you get into Gnosticism, you get into the book of Genesis. So it's kind of like, whoa, 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 whoa. So you telling me that these Satanists are using the Bible? Like, and it gets so much worse. It's not just the Satanists. It's the Masons. It's Islam. Like, Islam has their own form of magic. Very different. Then there's two forms of Israelite, Hebrew, whatever you want to call it. There's two form factors of that magic. And the other form factor was built off of like aspects of Yiddish. I don't even know how to explain all this. I really don't. I don't like getting into any of this because it's like, how do I begin to explain to you that I know me as a normal citizen, you as a normal citizen, everyone else as a normal person would not believe this if you explained it to them in plain text. You cannot explain to them that aspects of you, of your persuasion skills, of your charming skills, like aspects of that and how you maintain yourself and how you interact with people could be constituted as magic. And saying that to somebody, they'd be like, so you telling me anytime somebody markets to me, they're practicing? I'm like, yeah, in a weird way, they kind of are. And it gets worse. And the problem exacerbates itself because, like me, I was just learning how to draw. I never intended to. I never intended for me to draw that painting or that drawing in that way. But when I got as far as I did with it, um, it just left me really questioning a lot of things. And the more I learned, the more I got in more into this stuff, the more I was just like, oh, like it's not that I did anything bad, but it's just that because I understood how to create a foundation based on my observations of natural law, I was I just had the precognitive ability to understand why certain occultic things are the way they are. Again, occultic meaning hidden. So it's kind of like there's a reason why they give us the false image of Christ. And it's because it obfuscates the idea and it is an attempt to cut you off from that, I don't know what you would call it, from that association, from pulling that iconography, from pulling that, like, I don't know. That gets into like spiritual woo woo, and I don't even know if anybody knows about like stuff like the Akashic records. You believe that if you're connected to source, because I have a book right here, which I'd rather not say the name of. I don't know. How this book ended in my possession was another one of those weird things. But it all comes down to that book suggests that there is no inherent evil. There's only source. What comes between you and source is not at the center of it, right? Like if you were to there was this phrase, I can't even remember. I think that notebook's inside. There was just this phrase when I first started this whole thing. There was this one phrase that just popped into my head, and it was the craziest thing ever. And since then, it led me to think about how, in a weird way, like the butterfly effect, how would you assume that you dropping a piece of trash on the floor, would it have an effect in the greater world? Some people would say no, some people would say yes, but I think it's more of, you get to aspects of Gematria, and you get to the aspect of, do you believe that our language, our letters, could be represented in a numerical form factor? Is the way that I'm speaking, could that be equated to some numerical form factor? Could you then insert or input that data, that subset, into an equation that would spit out a result? So if I threw that piece of trash here in my garage, it wouldn't make that much of a difference. But if I threw that piece of trash in Beverly Hills, it's different because, one, it's not the same environment. Two, that neighborhood is actually maintained and cleaned. So what would be the difference? The effect would be somebody would clean it up over there. I would clean it up here myself. But you know what I mean? It's not. There's just different levels of things that you twist the knobs to, right? What happens if, because you threw that piece of trash, the city worker who then had to pick that trash up, just because a little bit of his time was taken away, he then had to encounter a series of misfortunate events that led him, that all started with him stopping at a red light, right? If I didn't throw that piece of trash there, he would have never had to stop at that red light because the time difference would have been like minutes. But within those minutes, now he had to stop at that red light. Now he had to encounter a whole other subset of reality just because I decided to change that one subfactor. Very interesting stuff. I started thinking about that. Thought came to me because I had watched a movie called Primer, and it was a movie about very interesting stuff. Now that I think about it, because CERN, maybe I should actually talk about this. Where in the movie Primer, somebody discovers that they create this experiment where it's just a simple box, and they discover that anytime they put an item in that box, that a certain kind of residue would build up on it. Well, they were like, what the hell is this residue? What's this residue here, right? They get it tested at the lab, and at the lab, the guy tells them, hey, this residue is kind of rare, and like, how did you get so much of it? And the guy's like, what do you mean? What do you mean so much of it? And he's like, yeah, this sort of residue only builds up after this much time has passed. And with the amount you've have, it's almost like it's been sitting there for a couple decades. And then the scientist was like, wait, what do you mean a couple decades? What this dude ends up discovering was anything that you put inside this box, right? When you turn on the box, you warm it up. But the moment you turn it on, it creates a pinpoint factor where that is point A. Then when you turn off the box at point B, when you turn it off, that box maintains energy that it'll expend slowly over an amount of hours. What they discovered was if you put yourself in the box, you go back to point A. So it's a form of time travel where you have to turn on the box to create a save point. Then you have to go do whatever you're going to do. Then when you turn off the box, you get in the box and you wait all those hours. Then it spits you out to when you initially turned on the box. Why that matters, at least in my opinion, is because of the way CERN works. CERN is this big giant loop. Um, some people speculate that it is a form of, what was it? Somebody suggested that because of what CERN was doing with experiments, that led to the discovery of the internet. And then there's this really crazy story that you can probably find on YouTube where the research at CERN supposedly led to the development of the internet. Let me end that. There is this other crazy theory that I heard that this person had this normal house, and at this normal house he set up a computer, and he was just messing around with the terminal. This was the 80s, so it was still kind of like black and green. And he's just doing what he does on the computer, and then he discovers that he has a message. Well, he ends up communicating with this person he thinks he's communicating with, only to discover that this person is speaking in a very peculiar old style language, like an old English style of language. So he researches it, and he's like, what the hell? Like, if he's talking to me like this, that means that he's from this time period. The person later elaborates that, like, yeah, I have a computer because somebody from the future gave me this computer. And I'm like, why would... Weird, but what made it even weirder was that it was at the same house. Right? Like, these two people were communicating to each other because they were at the same house. Very interesting story. That one I actually will try to look for and put in the description box. So you get into CERN. CERN is a giant loop. Are they creating a point A and then running that thing for a point B, allowing for a transference from future to past? I don't know. I don't know. But what I do know is obfuscation is a tactic. So I always account for all of these weird obfuscation factors that at least I encountered. Because you can always try to obfuscate the truth, but you can never obfuscate people's actions. You can never obfuscate their desires, and people will do what they do. So one of the things that I never actually finished this topic, but with karma, the idea of cycles. One thing I've noticed is that they say that there's atheists and they don't believe in the afterlife, but I'm like, you may not believe in the afterlife, but there are all these other people in very affluent positions who have all this money, who do all this other shit, but they do very peculiar charity work. They offer much in the way of charity work, only for part of it to be funneling money for who knows what, and then another one for actually to do what it's supposed to do. And I don't know. With the way that this person explained karma and cycles, it just made me think, like, wait. So I don't know. It led me to introducing that to people who aren't religious. You may not be religious, but the people who maintain the power structure, the principalities, with the way the world works, whatever you want to call this, they do. A lot of people can say that they don't believe in Creator, God, Christ, whatever word they want to use for it. But you may not. But the people that I've been looking into do. Because everything they do in their actions is to obfuscate karmic laws. Where, right, getting you to sign a piece of paper that says that you can't go after the people responsible, and them telling you you're waiving your rights away, but yet you still signing it, right? It's because of your ignorance that it is allowing them to absolve themselves of that karmic debt. But it's like, it gets into woo-woo levels, because even though, you can obfuscate that truth, but the only way it works in order for you to throw off that karma is that person needs to be completely ignorant of what you're doing. And that's a rule in everything that I've seen, right? When people were pushing Russiagate when people were pushing Russiagate, they were like saying all of this information as if it were true. But they were only saying it because somebody in a position of authority said that. But that person in that position of authority also does charity work. And it just made me think about karmic laws, and it's just like, for people who say they don't believe in God sometimes, I'm like, you do a lot of actions that offset karmic debt, even though for a guy who says he doesn't believe in God, very interesting reoccurring pattern that I kept seeing. It's like with the art, it's like, how do you expect me to believe that these people aren't religious, that they don't believe in anything, yet they behave as if they do, they act as if they do, like even their vengeance, some of their crazy vengeances are all based on a strife against creator, a strife against God. And it's just like, I don't know, it all depends on what you know about karmic laws and all this other stuff. Yeah, I got lost in talking about art and all this other stuff. I don't even remember. What was this? What was he? What I can gather. Yeah, for it being a loose factor of what I can gather in terms of just the cultic knowledge that I know. That's just barely scratching the surface because I couldn't really articulate my words or the idea that I'm trying to get to. So I was just loosely talking about like my drawing, about the symbols that I used, why I organized it the way I did. I don't even want to turn it on. Like this spiral artwork was for the rabbit hole. I was supposed to put a little rabbit like floating into the down, and then there were supposed to be bookshelves and all this other stuff. And I don't think I'm gonna finish this run. Oh yeah, I should. Should I mention that? It's 46 minutes in. Whatever. I plan on distancing myself, right? No one's in the chat, right? Okay. I plan on distancing myself from the previous group of people that I was with. And like, the last stream, I just didn't want to come out right and say it because I was just so distraught. I was like, damn, like this kind of hurts that I have to walk away from another group of people. And it's like, nothing they did. It's nothing I did. I'm not trying to point fingers. It's just, I think it's better for me to walk away. Only because I just felt so disruptive in that group. I have another video where I talk about that. Just how disruptive I feel in people's lives. And it's just like, I don't know why people always assume that I'm speaking in roundabout statements. And it's like, no, if I'm going to say something, I'm just going to say it out loud. Like, what's the point of me like wording shit in a way where you have to kind of like gather what I'm saying? It's like, nah, dude, like, I don't play that. I wear my heart on my sleeve. Like, I need to stop saying like, I don't know. The way I see it is, I might not look like a fat boy, but deep down inside, I'm still that nice fat boy that I was forever ago. It's kind of why I'm like, I don't know. I don't know. So for people to look at me like I have some ulterior motive, I'm like, I don't know what you think of me, but I'm out. Deuces. Like, I don't got to deal with this shit. And it was all over. Should I say it or should I say it? Okay, I'm not gonna. Whatever. It is what it is. So I probably will do this a lot more on my channel and actually like talk about the news that I want to talk about. Only because it's like, just right now I could probably find an hour just to talk about all the dumb shit that I say on fucking Telegram. And it's like, I just do this. I do this naturally. I do this because I enjoy it. I do it because I want to bully people on the internet. No, I'm joking. I don't actually. I usually tend to bully people on the internet, or it comes off that way because it's just like, I'll see that people will have problems with the things that I say, and it's just like, why? Why do you really have a problem with what I said? Is it because it just doesn't conform to what you want to think? Is it because XYZ? Is it because this or that? Like, I don't know. I find people very interesting sometimes because it's just like, why are you yelling at me? Why are you telling me am I wrong? This and that. Can you tell me more? I find that kind of attitude very like, whoa, man, whoa. What do you mean you want to discuss these ideas out loudly? Why aren't you just agreeing with me? Because that's what allowed multiple countries to get overturned, and I don't know. I don't know. I did 50 minutes. I think I did good. I still found it very gut wrenching that I don't know. This would be the third group of people that I leave, but it all feels, I don't want to say necessary. Like, even my absence, like my social media shit, just feels weird to me, but necessary. It's also odd. I don't know. Will not stay here any further than this. Thanks for watching, and yeah, you're stay tuned for whatever your normal programming is, because who knows what I will do in the next episode of Ramirez-san. No, I'm joking. Yeah, this was frogbear.zil. The Telegram group name is frogbear.zil, name down below. That's my frog slash bear. Very poor attempt. I need to finish that drawing. Not sure what else to say.